Hello, students. This will be the second lecture on the English 111 research project that will deal primarily with the last section of the project. So just as a quick reminder, here's an example of the template that you can find on Blackboard where you will input your information into this structure. You'll put your writing into this structure to follow it. Our previous video and class dealt with these two, the literature review and scene analysis. So refer to the other video on Blackboard or look at the virtual class we did discussing the literature review and scene analysis section of the paper. So today we will do a video in particular on section number 3. Right? Section number 3 is where this part of the video will cover, and we'll really do a deep dive on how to do the third part of the paper and briefly talk about the work cited. Okay, so after you have completed the literature review and scene analysis section, you will move on to the last section of the research project where you will finally sort of bring the entire project together and really present your definitive answer on whether or not the film is a dystopian or hopeful piece of art. It presents a dystopian or hopeful message. In order to complete this last section of the paper, be prepared to think reflectively about all of the work you have done leading up to this point. So think about the materials you read for the literature review and the scenes you analyzed in the scene analysis section. So the last section of the paper, section 3, you will compose an essay of at least 500 words that explains if you believe Cuarón's film presents a hopeful or dystopian message. No matter your take, all right, if you believe it's a hopeful film or a dystopian film, you will need to justify your thoughts by referencing all the work you have done in the project. You do not need to necessarily quote or summarize any of the research you've mentioned that you've done, but it will be helpful if you refer to it in some way. Even though this is a section of a larger paper, it can still help to think of it as a short essay, like a mini essay. So let's take a look at that. So to reach the word limit, you would need at least 2 paragraphs, though depending on the length of your paragraphs, you may need 3. So as we said about this section, let's think what goes in this section. Now note, just as a reminder, this is for section number 3 of the research project. This is the last section after you have completed the literature review and the scene analysis. So in this section, the first part, what we could call your sort of introduction, the first thing you should do is describe the work you did throughout the project. Tell me what you read, tell me how you analyzed the scenes. This is a chance for you to use 3 to 4 sentences to brag about all of the work you did in writing the first 2 sections of the paper. Right? How did you watch the film? Did you go to YouTube? Did you watch the scenes multiple times? How did you read the essays? What were your rationale in selecting the essays that you did? You should tell me what you did, what you accomplished. Be prepared to brag a bit. Then, after you've kind of told me all the work you've done to complete the essay, tell me how this work helped you form, and this would be your thesis statement, the answer to, does Cuarón's film have a hopeful or dystopian message? Please remember, as discussed, it should be a hopeful or dystopian message towards the issues and themes dealt with in the movie. Cuarón's film is not concerned with the infertility crisis as a quote-unquote real event. So he's not hopeful or dystopian about women being able to give birth. He's hopeful and dystopian about themes such as class, nationalism, immigration, environmental damage, the loss of faith. These are the things that Cuarón's film talks about. So you should be able to articulate whether or not he has a hopeful or dystopian message about one of these issues. So that would be your first paragraph. You may think of that paragraph as your introduction. Then, in the third section, you should move down to talk about paragraphs 1 and 2. All right? Paragraphs 1 and 2 should be where you provide detailed thoughts about why you believe the film is a hopeful or dystopian message about an issue. Right? In the paragraph, all right, I want you to do a few key steps. Like all the things that we've done so far, You can think of these as a three-step process. All right, step one, in your body paragraphs after the introduction. Tell me one thing you learned from writing this project and why it's important to your claim about the message. So tell me one thing you learned from reading the research or rewatching specific scenes again, and how that helped you decide that the film is hopeful or dystopian about an issue. All right? Then describe to me this thing you learned. Did you notice something that happened in a particular scene? Did you read something in one of the articles that was really enlightening or helped you understand the film in a new way? Okay. Then finally, explain how this thing you learned, all right, relates to your thesis that Quran has a hopeful or dystopian message. So think of it as three steps. One thing you learned, what did you learn, how did this thing that you learned help support your belief that the film is hopeful or dystopian. If you are under the 500 word limit, basically all you need to do in a second paragraph is repeat the steps from paragraph 1, but tell me a different thing. So if you're under the 500 word limit, you just repeat paragraph 1 again, but with a new thing you learned from one of the essays or one of the times you rewatched important scenes from the film. So if you're thinking about what you need to write in the third section of the essay, this would be it. All right, so you can kind of march through this to help you complete that third section of the essay. All right. Here again, we break down sort of what you should do in the body paragraph example. All right, how you learned one thing from doing this project that you feel is important. You describe to me this thing that you learned, and then you explain to me how this thing that you learned supports your claim that the film is hopeful or dystopian about an issue. This is what you would do in the body paragraph. Remember, this is after you have done the work in the introduction. Okay? And so that's all you have to do to complete the third section of the essay. Just remember, this assignment is formal. All right. So as you write it, make sure that you have correct and clear sentences. Right? Don't just talk about your feelings and thoughts about the film. Make sure that you are applying those feelings and thoughts to things that you learned and things we discussed while watching and analyzing the film. So in this third section, I don't want you to say that you feel it's hopeful just because you feel it's hopeful. Reference something that you learned from analyzing the scenes or reading the essays that shows you that this is hopeful. All right, it can't just be your opinion. It must be connected to some work that you did in the literature review or the scene analysis. Right. So to do that, you should be able to reflect on all of the work you did and learned from this project. Also, make sure that you reach 500 words for this section of the essay. And note, if you cite specific ideas or quote anything from the literature review, please make sure to cite it again in this section, even if you cited it earlier in the paper. So for instance, if there was an idea in the literature review that you found particularly interesting, and you mentioned it and summarized it in part 1 of the essay, if you're referencing and explaining what you learned from that, and you summarize it again, do an in-text citation for it again. Even if you already did it once, you have to do it every time at the end of every sentence that you do it. That's the only way that you can make sure that you are covering yourself to avoid any claims of plagiarism or academic dishonesty. Okay, so just a few more things to end up before we're done with this video lecture. Right? As we said, remember that every time you do an in-text citation, after every sentence that contains an idea that is not yours, you must do a parenthetical citation. If you do not do the name, you should if you do not do the name of the author, you should do the author's name and page number. If you use the author's name in a sentence, you should just use the page number. If there is no page numbers because it is an electronic only site like a web page, just use that author's name. Right? Just as a reminder, plagiarism can result in an F for the assignment. So please do not attempt to plagiarize. And one of the ways that you can always guarantee that, all right, is that a use of in-text citation for every idea that isn't yours at the end of each sentence. So here's just another look at how to do a parenthetical citation after the end of an idea that is not yours. Right? Just remember to do this at the end of every sentence. So if you're thinking about this, once again, sorry to belabor the point, but it's very important. Almost every sentence in your literature review most likely will use an in-text citation because you are summarizing the ideas of what you have read. Right? If you quote at all in the essay, in either the scene analysis section or section 3, right, you're not allowed to quote in the literature review, remember that. But if you quote at any time in the paper, make sure you use an in-text citation and use this rule of doing an in-text citation after every idea that isn't yours in every class you take in college from now on. Remember, only by being certain that you are doing this can you cover yourself to not be accused of being a plagiarist or trying to cheat on a paper. You may download the PowerPoint and watch these brief videos that all explain in more detail sort of the techniques and why you should do in-text citation if you are still confused about the process. Right. Please remember that we have created the research template for you to use for the research project. You may find that in the reading materials folder on Blackboard. It was shown to you in a previous video. Please use this template to write your paper. I have organized the structure of the paper exactly the way I want you to do it. So this helps you just kind of put what your thoughts are and put your writing into the spaces where it goes to complete the document. So please, please, please use this structure and use the template to complete your project. Finally, as required in anything that uses secondary sources, right, you will need to have a works cited page. Whenever you use sources that are outside the basic nature of a class, most likely in a college course, you will be required to cite them. It may not be MLA style, it may be APA, it may be what is called Chicago style, or it may be what the professor wants you to do, but if you're using secondary sources, be prepared to create a works cited page. So here's a brief example of what a works cited page would look like in a larger research project. Right? As you see, it's done alphabetically by author. If there is no author, it's done, or a movie, it's done this way. All right. The second line of each citation should be indented. All right. And you should be able to create a clean list of everything that you have cited in the body of the essay. All right. If you have a in-text citation, then whatever you have cited in the body of the essay while you're writing, using the parentheses, must show up as an item listed in your works cited. All right. You can't just have something in there that does not appear in the essay. Much like the links to view materials on in-text citation, you may download the PowerPoint and look at these links to find how to create a works cited item for anything that you need for this project. Note, you will need to read this website to find the correct item and correct way to cite either a journal article or a website that you have read to complete the research project. Good luck, and I am excited to read all of your papers next week.